The package sat on my kitchen table like a coiled snake, pretty as you please with its silver ribbon and my daughter's careful handwriting across the top. But Martha's face had gone chalk white, and she was backing away from it like it might bite. "Don't touch it, Henry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Look at those holes." I squinted at the box. Sure enough, tiny punctures dotted the sides, and something that looked suspiciously like copper wire peeked through where the ribbon met the wrapping paper. "Sarah wouldn't send us anything dangerous," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was thinking about how strange our daughter had been acting these past few weeks. Jumpy as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, always looking over her shoulder, never staying for dinner when she visited. Martha grabbed my arm. "Remember what she said last week? About being in trouble? About people watching her apartment?" My blood ran cold. Sarah had been cryptic, talking in circles about mistakes and bad choices. We'd figured it was just another one of her dramatic phases. She'd always been theatrical, even as a little girl. But what if it wasn't drama this time? I reached for the phone and dialed 911 before I could talk myself out of it. "This is going to sound crazy," I told the dispatcher, "but I think someone just mailed us a bomb." 30 minutes later, our quiet suburban street looked like a war zone. Police cars lined both sides of the road, their red and blue lights painting the neighbors' houses in patriotic colors that seemed all wrong for the situation. The bomb squad had cordoned off our entire block, and that mechanical robot they use for dangerous packages was rolling up our front walk like something out of a science fiction movie. Martha and I huddled behind a police cruiser 3 houses down, watching our home through the gap between 2 officers' shoulders. Mrs. Henderson from next door kept trying to get closer to see what was happening, but a young policeman with kind eyes kept gently steering her back. 30 years we've lived here," Martha murmured, clutching my hand. "Never so much as a parking ticket, and now this." The robot's mechanical arm extended toward our kitchen window, visible through the gauzy curtains Martha had hung just last spring. Everything looked so normal from the outside, the roses she'd been tending, the American flag hanging limp in the still air, the Father's Day card I could see propped against the salt and pepper shakers where Sarah had left it yesterday. "Units in position," crackled a voice over the police radio. "Package appears to contain explosive materials. Repeat, we have confirmed explosives." Martha's knees buckled, and I caught her before she could fall. The young officer brought her a folding chair and a bottle of water, but she just stared at our house like she was watching it burn. "Why would anyone want to hurt us?" she asked. "We don't have enemies. We don't even have interesting enough lives to have enemies." But I was thinking about Sarah again, about the dark circles under her eyes and how thin she'd gotten. About the way she'd flinched when a car backfired last month, and how she'd insisted on meeting us at restaurants instead of coming home. My phone rang, and Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Dad?" Her voice was breathless, panicked. "Dad, please tell me you didn't open that package." "Sarah, where are you? What's going on?" "I'm with the FBI, Dad. I've been working with them for months. The people I got mixed up with, they found out I was cooperating, and they sent that box to scare me. But they got our address mixed up with my apartment number." The words hit me like cold water. "What people, Sarah? What kind of trouble are you in?" "Drug dealers, Dad. I was stupid, I needed money for rent, and I thought I could just let them store some things in my spare room. But it got bigger and bigger, and when I tried to get out, they threatened me. So I went to the police, and the police connected me with the FBI." Through the phone, I could hear voices in the background, official-sounding conversations punctuated by radio static. "The agents are with me now," Sarah continued. "They're saying the package has enough explosives to take out half the house. Dad, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." I watched the bomb squad robot carefully lift the package with its mechanical arms, moving with the deliberate precision of a surgeon. "You're safe now, that's what matters. The FBI got them, Dad. All of them. They were planning to use the explosion to destroy evidence at my apartment, make it look like I was cooking drugs and accidentally blew myself up. But they sent the bomb to the wrong address, and that gave the agents time to move in. Martha was listening now, pressing her ear close to the phone. Sarah? Honey, are you all right? I'm okay, Mom. I'm okay. And the bad guys are all in custody. Agent Morrison says they'll be put away for a very long time. The robot had reached the street now, carrying our deadly Father's Day present like a careful waiter with an expensive bottle of wine. They loaded it into a containment vehicle that looked like an armored truck, and I found myself breathing normally for the first time in hours. Sarah, I said, next Father's Day, how about you just get me a tie? Her laugh was shaky but real. Deal, Dad. And I promise, no more surprises. As the police cars began to pull away and our neighbors emerged from their houses like prairie dogs after a storm, I put my arm around Martha and thought about how different this day could have ended. The package that was meant to silence my daughter had instead given the FBI everything they needed to bring down the whole operation. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things in disguise. Though I have to say, I could have done without quite so much excitement on Father's Day. Martha squeezed my hand as we walked back toward our house. Well, Henry, she said, this is certainly one Father's Day we'll never forget. I looked at our front door, still standing exactly where it had been this morning, and smiled. No, we certainly won't. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear Sarah's car pulling into our driveway, finally coming home. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. You'd think after nearly getting blown to smithereens on one Father's Day, a man might catch a break the following year. But apparently, trouble runs in families like a bad gene, and my other daughter Emma was about to prove that point in the most disturbing way imaginable. The package arrived on a Tuesday, 3 days before Father's Day, delivered by a somber-looking man in a black suit who handled it like it contained the crown jewels. Emma's careful script adorned the shipping label, along with a return address that made my blood run cold, Peaceful Rest Funeral Home. Henry, Dolores called from the kitchen window where she'd been watching the delivery. What in Sam Hill is Emma sending you from a funeral parlor? I carried the box inside, noting its weight and the way it seemed to shift slightly when I moved it. The shape was distinctive, rectangular, about the size of a shoebox, but heavier than it looked. My wife appeared at my elbow, her sharp eyes taking in details I'd missed. Look at this, she said, pointing to the small print on the shipping label. Priority overnight delivery. Cost her near $50 to send this thing. When's the last time Emma spent 50 cents she didn't have to? Dolores had a point. Our Emma had been the family's designated disaster since she could walk, always needing money, always in some kind of scrape. She'd borrowed against her car 3 times, defaulted on 2 credit cards, and hadn't held a steady job longer than 6 months in her entire adult life. The idea of her spending serious money on a Father's Day gift was about as likely as finding snow in July. Maybe she's finally getting her act together, I said, but even I didn't believe it. Henry Watts, you're many things, but naive isn't one of them. Dolores circled the box like a detective at a crime scene. This thing's shaped exactly like those urns they use for cremated remains. And it's got that serious weight to it. I set the package on our dining room table and stared at it. Ever since the bomb scare with Sarah last year, both Dolores and I had developed a healthy suspicion of unexpected deliveries. But this felt different somehow, not dangerous in the explosive sense, but wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. Emma's been taking care of Aunt Prudence these past 6 months, I said slowly, pieces of a puzzle beginning to form in my mind. Remember how she moved into Prudence's house to be her caregiver? Dolores nodded grimly. That old woman's got more money than sense, and Emma's got more sense than scruples when it comes to other people's fortunes. Aunt Prudence wasn't really our aunt, she was Dolores's great-aunt on her mother's side, a spinster who'd made a fortune in real estate back in the 50s. She'd never married, never had children, and at 83, she'd been battling emphysema for the better part of a year. When Emma volunteered to move in and provide round-the-clock care, we'd all been suspicious of her motives, but Prudence had seemed grateful for the company. "When's the last time you talked to Prudence?" I asked. Dolores frowned, thinking. "Must be 3 weeks now." Emma said she was getting worse, sleeping most of the time, not up for phone calls. We stared at each other across the dining room table, both of us thinking the same terrible thought but neither wanting to voice it first. My phone rang, startling us both. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with more trepidation than any father should feel when talking to his own child. "Dad? Did you get my package yet?" Her voice was artificially bright, the way it got when she was trying to sell me on some harebrained scheme. In the background, I could hear what sounded like traffic, as if she was calling from a pay phone or standing outside somewhere. "Just arrived," I said carefully. "Haven't opened it yet." "Oh, you really should. It's something special, something I thought you'd want to have. A keepsake, you might say." Dolores was shaking her head vigorously, pointing at the box and making slashing motions across her throat. "Emma, honey, where are you calling from? You sound like you're outside." "Just running some errands, Dad." "Listen, about that package, it's kind of delicate, so you might want to open it carefully. Maybe over some newspaper or something, in case there's any spillage." The word spillage hit me like a physical blow. What kind of Father's Day gift required newspaper underneath it to catch spillage? "Emma, what exactly did you send me?" There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing heavily into the phone. "It's Aunt Prudence, Dad. She passed away last week. I thought you'd want to have her with you, since you two were always so close." The room spun around me. Dolores grabbed my arm to steady me, her face pale as winter sky. "She's, what?" "Emma, what are you saying?" "She went peacefully in her sleep. I was right there with her. The funeral home said cremation was what she wanted, and I thought since she didn't have any other family except us, well, I thought you should have her ashes." I looked at the box on our table with new horror. If Emma was telling the truth, then Aunt Prudence's remains were sitting on the same table where we ate Sunday dinner and played cards with the neighbors. But something in Emma's voice didn't ring true. She was talking too fast, breathing too hard, and there was an edge of desperation that made my parental instincts scream warnings. "Emma, did Prudence change her will recently?" Another pause, longer this time. "Well, yes, as a matter of fact. She left everything to me. Said I was the only one who really cared about her in her final days." Dolores was frantically scribbling on a notepad, called a funeral home. She held it up where I could see it, pointing emphatically at the words. "Which funeral home handled the arrangements?" I asked. "Peaceful Rest, over on Maple Street." "Dad, you really should open that package. I put a lot of thought into it." After we hung up, Dolores and I stared at each other in the heavy silence of our dining room. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, marking seconds that felt like hours. "She killed her," Dolores whispered. "Our Emma killed that poor old woman for her money." "We don't know that for sure," I said, but my heart wasn't in the denial. "And now she's trying to make you an accessory. Get your fingerprints all over those ashes, make you complicit in whatever she did." I called Peaceful Rest Funeral Home with hands that shook so badly I had to dial 3 times. "Peaceful Rest, this is Marcus," answered a deep voice with a professional sympathy that seemed genuine. "I'm calling about Prudence Whitman. I understand you handled her cremation last week." There was a long pause. "Sir, I'm afraid there's no record of anyone by that name. We haven't had a cremation in the past 2 weeks." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the table. Dolores picked it up and spoke in a voice that could cut glass. "This is Dolores Watts. Could you please check again for Prudence Whitman? My niece claims she had her cremated there." More conversation I couldn't quite follow, then Dolores hung up and looked at me with eyes full of fear and fury. "No Prudence Whitman. No cremation. But here's the interesting part, they're missing a cremation urn from their display room. Discovered it gone yesterday morning. We called the police. Detective Rodriguez arrived within the hour, a compact woman with intelligent eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every variety of human foolishness. She examined the package without opening it, photographed it from every angle, and asked questions that made it clear she'd dealt with family murders before. "Has your daughter ever shown violent tendencies?" she asked, writing notes in a small spiral book. "Not violent, exactly," I said. "But desperate. Always desperate for money. And she's been living with the victim for how long?" 6 months. Aunt Prudence has emphysema, needed constant care. Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly. "We'll need to do a wellness check on Mrs. Whitman. And we'll need to open this package as evidence." She called in a crime scene team, and our quiet house filled with people in latex gloves and official badges. They opened Emma's Father's Day gift with the same careful precision the bomb squad had used the year before, but this time the contents were even more disturbing than explosives. Cremation ashes. Gray-white powder in a plastic bag, sealed inside a wooden urn that still had a price tag stuck to the bottom. But whose ashes? "Could be anyone," Detective Rodriguez said grimly. "Pet crematorium, somebody's old relative, maybe just fireplace ash mixed with sand. We'll test it, but the real question is where Mrs. Whitman is right now." They found Prudence 3 hours later, very much alive and hiding in the basement office of Peaceful Rest Funeral Home. She was thin and pale but alert, sitting in a comfortable chair with an oxygen tank beside her and a satisfied smile on her weathered face. "I've been waiting 2 weeks for you people to figure this out," she told Detective Rodriguez with the tartness of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. "That granddaughter of mine tried to smother me with a pillow last Tuesday night. Thought she'd succeeded, too." The plan, as Prudence explained it, had been months in the making. She'd suspected Emma's motives from the beginning but had played along to see how far her great-niece would go. When Emma made her move with the pillow, Prudence had held her breath and gone limp, then waited until Emma left the room to call her old friend Marcus at the funeral home. "We've been friends for 40 years, Prudence said with evident pride. "He helped me stage my own death, right down to the fake death certificate." Emma was so eager to cash in, she never questioned anything. They'd watched Emma steal the urn, mix up some ashes from Marcus's fireplace, and ship the whole thing to me with the naive belief that involving her father would somehow legitimize her inheritance claim or provide her with a convenient scapegoat. "She always was too clever for her own good," Prudence said sadly. "But not nearly as clever as she thought." Emma was arrested that evening at a casino 3 counties over, where she'd been celebrating her inheritance with money she'd already stolen from Prudence's bank account. The look on her face when Detective Rodriguez read her the charges, attempted murder, elder abuse, theft, and mail fraud, was something I'll never forget. She'd bet everything on greed and lost it all to her own arrogance. As Dolores and I sat in our living room that night, watching the last of the police cars pull away from our house, I couldn't help but think about the pattern emerging in our Father's Day celebrations. First Sarah with her bomb, now Emma with her murder plot. "Well," Dolores said, echoing my thoughts, "I wonder what kind of trouble our third daughter will bring us next Father's Day." I looked at the empty space on our dining room table where Emma's package had sat just hours earlier, and shuddered. "Maybe we should start spending Father's Day out of town," I said. Dolores nodded thoughtfully. "Or maybe we should just stop telling the girls our address." Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. By the third Father's Day after our troubles began, Eleanor and I had developed what you might call a healthy paranoia about unexpected packages. So when the delivery truck pulled up to our house that Thursday morning, we both watched from behind the living room curtains like a couple of suspicious neighbors. The driver was different this time, a young woman in a crisp uniform who handled the package with unusual care, as if it contained something fragile or dangerous. The box itself looked innocent enough, about the size of a hardcover book, wrapped in plain brown paper with minimal markings. But Eleanor has always had sharper eyes than me, and she spotted what I'd missed. "Henry, come look at this," she said, adjusting her reading glasses and peering at the shipping label through the window. "That writing looks mighty peculiar." I squinted where she was pointing. The address appeared normal at first glance, but when the morning sun hit it at just the right angle, I could see what she meant. The letters seemed to shimmer and shift, and there were strange symbols printed in what looked like invisible ink around the edges of the label. "What in tarnation is that supposed to be?" I muttered. Eleanor opened the front door cautiously and retrieved the package, holding it at arm's length like it might bite her. Inside, she set it on our kitchen table, the same table that had hosted a bomb 2 years ago and cremation ashes last year. We were beginning to think that table was cursed. "It's from Jessica," Eleanor announced, reading the return address. "But look at this." She tilted the package under our kitchen light, and I saw what had caught her attention. Hidden symbols danced across the label like some kind of code, appearing and disappearing as the light moved. They looked like something you'd see in a spy movie, all geometric shapes and numbers that meant nothing to ordinary folks like us. "This is way beyond my understanding," I admitted. "All this computer nonsense makes my head spin." Our Jessica had always been the technical one in the family. While Sarah got herself mixed up with criminals and Emma chased after inheritance money, Jessica lived in a world of computer screens and passwords and things called algorithms that might as well have been magic spells for all I understood them. She worked for some big technology company downtown, the kind of place where everyone wore expensive suits and talked in acronyms. According to Jessica, they handled data management solutions for enterprise clients, which I think meant they helped other companies organize their computer files. She made good money at it, too, better than her sisters, anyway. But lately, Jessica had been acting strange. Not bomb threat strange or murder plot strange, but worried in a way that went deeper than her usual work stress. She'd started calling us at odd hours, asking seemingly random questions about our daily routines and whether we'd noticed anyone following us or watching the house. Last month, she'd insisted on having dinner at a different restaurant than usual, one way across town, where she'd insisted on sitting with her back to the wall and kept checking her phone every few minutes. When I'd asked her what was wrong, she just said she was having workplace difficulties, and changed the subject. "Maybe we should call her before we do anything with this," Eleanor suggested, but as she reached for the phone, it rang first. Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID, but when Eleanor answered, our daughter's voice was tight with panic. "Mom, please tell me you haven't opened that package yet." Eleanor and I exchanged one of those married couple looks that said everything without words. "Here we go again. We just brought it inside, honey. What's going on? Don't open it. Don't even touch it more than you already have. I'm coming over right now, and I'm bringing some people with me." "What kind of people?" I called out, leaning toward the phone. "Federal agents, Dad. FBI Cybercrime Division. This is bigger than you can imagine." The line went dead, leaving Eleanor and me staring at each other across our kitchen table, where an innocuous brown package sat like a loaded gun. "Well," Eleanor said with the kind of grim humor that comes from experience, "at least this year we know it's dangerous before anyone gets hurt." 20 minutes later, our quiet suburban street looked like the set of a science fiction movie. 3 black SUVs with government plates had parked outside our house, and serious-looking people in dark suits were unloading equipment I couldn't even begin to identify. Neighbors were peeking out their windows, probably wondering if the Watts family had finally gone completely off the rails. Jessica arrived in the middle SUV, accompanied by a tall woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that suggested she was used to being in charge. Jessica looked tired and stressed, but there was something else in her expression, a kind of grim satisfaction that puzzled me. "Dad, Mom, this is Agent Catherine Morrison, FBI Cybercrime Division," Jessica said as they approached our front door. "Agent Morrison, these are my parents." Agent Morrison shook our hands with a firm grip and got straight to business. "Mr. and Mrs. Watts, I need you to understand that the package your daughter sent you is extremely dangerous, but not in the way you might expect. She gestured to the team of technicians who were setting up sophisticated-looking equipment in our living room. Laptops, scanning devices, and things with blinking lights that belonged in a space program rather than a suburban home. The box contains what appears to be evidence of corporate espionage and data trafficking, Agent Morrison continued. But it's also equipped with surveillance technology that would immediately alert the perpetrators to your location and identity the moment it's opened. I felt my knees go weak. You mean they'd know we have whatever's in there? More than that, Jessica said quietly. They'd know exactly who you are, where you live, and what you look like. And based on what I've learned about these people, that information would put you in serious danger. Eleanor sank into her favorite armchair, looking older than her 72 years. Jessica, honey, what have you gotten yourself mixed up in? Our daughter took a deep breath and looked at Agent Morrison, who nodded encouragingly. I work for Pinnacle Data Solutions, Jessica began. For the past year, I've been noticing irregularities in our data handling protocols. Files going to servers they shouldn't, information being copied and transmitted to overseas locations, clients' personal data being accessed by unauthorized users. She paused, running her hands through her hair in a gesture I remembered from her childhood when she was working through a difficult problem. When I started asking questions, my supervisor told me to mind my own business. When I kept pushing, they transferred me to a different department. When I threatened to go to the authorities, they fired me and made it clear that my family might face consequences if I didn't keep quiet about what I'd seen. Agent Morrison took up the story. Ms. Watts came to us 6 months ago with evidence that Pinnacle was selling personal data from American citizens to foreign intelligence services. Banking information, medical records, social security numbers, everything you'd need to steal someone's identity or compromise their security. The technicians had finished setting up their equipment and were now scanning the package with devices that hummed and beeped like something from a hospital. One of them, a young man who looked barely old enough to shave, was typing rapidly on a laptop while studying readings on multiple screens. Confirmed, he announced. The package contains a miniaturized camera system, GPS tracker, and what appears to be a dead man's switch connected to remote servers. Opening it would trigger immediate data deletion and real-time surveillance of this location. I stared at the innocent-looking brown box with new horror. So if we'd opened it, they'd have known within seconds that you had their evidence, Agent Morrison said. And based on what we know about their methods, you would have become targets for elimination. Eleanor reached for my hand, gripping it tight. How is this our life now? How did we go from being ordinary people to getting packages full of bombs and murder evidence and spy cameras? Jessica looked stricken. I'm so sorry, Mom. I thought I was being clever, using your address as a safe haven for the evidence. I never imagined they'd be sophisticated enough to track the package or that they'd turn it into a trap. Agent Morrison cleared her throat. Actually, Ms. Watts, there's something else you need to know. She looked at Jessica with what might have been approval or possibly amusement. Your daughter hasn't been entirely honest with you about her situation. Jessica's face went red, and she suddenly couldn't meet our eyes. Jessica has been working as an undercover operative for the FBI for the past 8 months, Agent Morrison announced. Everything that happened at Pinnacle, the questions, the transfers, the firing, even the threats, was carefully orchestrated to build her cover and gather evidence. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. You mean she's been lying to us this whole time? Not lying, exactly, Jessica said quickly. More like, not telling you the whole truth. I couldn't risk compromising the operation, and I couldn't put you in danger by involving you in something this big. Agent Morrison nodded. The package she sent you was never meant to be opened by civilians. It was designed as bait, to draw Pinnacle's security team into revealing their surveillance capabilities and criminal methods. When they turned it into a trap, they essentially confessed to their crimes and provided us with evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. The young technician looked up from his laptop. Agent Morrison, we're getting activity on the tracking system. Multiple parties are attempting to access the package's location data. Perfect, Agent Morrison said with satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, we just caught them in the act. Over the next hour, our living room became a command center for what Agent Morrison described as the culmination of a federal investigation into international data trafficking. Computers chattered, radios crackled, and people in suits spoke in codes I didn't understand. Jessica sat with Eleanor and me on the couch, explaining as much as she could about her double life as a corporate whistleblower and federal operative. It started when I noticed that my company's servers were connecting to IP addresses in countries that we definitely weren't supposed to be doing business with, she said. When I researched deeper, I found evidence that they were selling detailed profiles of American citizens to foreign intelligence services. What kind of profiles? Eleanor asked. Everything. Financial records, medical histories, travel patterns, social media activity, shopping habits. Enough information to blackmail politicians, target military families, or steal the identities of anyone they wanted to impersonate. I thought about all the forms we'd filled out over the years, all the websites that ask for personal information, all the companies that promised to keep our data safe. And people just trusted them with all this? Most people don't read the fine print when they sign up for online services, Jessica said sadly. They click, agree, to terms and conditions that are deliberately written to be confusing, and companies like Pinnacle take advantage of that trust. Agent Morrison approached our little family conference with a grim smile. We've just received confirmation that Pinnacle's security team has been arrested at multiple locations. The package Jessica sent you has provided us with everything we need to shut down their entire operation. She paused, looking directly at Jessica with something that might have been pride. Your daughter's work over the past 8 months has potentially saved thousands of Americans from identity theft, financial fraud, and worse. She's a genuine hero. Jessica ducked her head, embarrassed by the praise. I just did what was right. You risked your life and your family's safety to expose criminals who were selling our country's secrets to hostile foreign powers, Agent Morrison corrected. That's the definition of heroism. As the FBI team packed up their equipment and prepared to leave, I found myself looking at Jessica with new eyes. My little girl who used to bring me drawings of flowers and butterflies had grown up to become some kind of spy, fighting battles I didn't even know existed. So what happens now? Eleanor asked. Now you go back to your normal lives, Agent Morrison said. Pinnacle Data Solutions will be shut down, its executives will face federal charges, and the data they stole will be recovered and secured. Jessica will receive a commendation from the Bureau, and all of you will hopefully never have to deal with anything like this again. After everyone left, the three of us sat in our living room, surrounded by the familiar furniture and family photos that suddenly seemed like artifacts from a simpler time. The brown package was gone, taken as evidence, leaving only a faint outline on our kitchen table where it had sat. Jessica, I said finally, next Father's Day, could you maybe just get me a nice card? Something without hidden cameras or federal investigations. She laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in months. I promise, Dad. Just a card. Maybe with a picture of a puppy or something equally harmless. Eleanor shook her head in amazement. 3 daughters, 3 Father's Days, 3 federal crimes. What are the odds? I looked around our quiet living room, thinking about bombs and murder plots and international espionage, all of which had somehow found their way to our front door through our own children. I don't know, I said, but I'm starting to think we should move to a cabin in the woods and disconnect our phone. Jessica grinned. Dad, after what I've seen about digital surveillance, the woods might not be far enough. And for the first time in 3 years, we all laughed together about the absurd turn our lives had taken. It felt good to laugh, even if we all knew that somewhere out there, another Father's Day was waiting for us, along with whatever trouble our children might bring home next. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. For years running now, and Father's Day had become something Agnes and I approached with the wariness of soldiers entering a minefield. We'd developed what you might call a system, any unexpected packages got photographed, examined from every angle, and subjected to Agnes's sharp-eyed scrutiny before we so much as thought about opening them. So when the delivery truck rumbled up our driveway that Friday afternoon, both of us were already on high alert. The package that arrived was different from the others, larger, heavier, and covered in official-looking stickers that made my retired pharmacist's heart skip a beat. Medical supplies, handle with care, was printed in bold red letters across the top, along with various symbols that were supposed to indicate biohazardous materials. But Agnes took one look at those symbols and her face went white as fresh snow. "Henry," she said in the voice she used when she was trying very hard to stay calm, "come look at this." I joined her on the front porch where she was holding the package at arm's length, like it might explode at any moment. Given our family's track record, that wasn't entirely unreasonable. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though I was already getting that familiar sinking feeling in my stomach. "These biohazard symbols," Agnes said, pointing to the stickers with a shaking finger. "They're wrong. All wrong. Agnes should know. She'd worked in medical administration at Mercy General for 30 years before retiring, and she'd handled more medical shipments than I could count. If anyone could spot a fake medical package, it was her. See this one?" She pointed to a triangular symbol with what looked like 3 circles inside it. "This is supposed to be the international symbol for radioactive materials, but they've got the circles positioned wrong. And this one here is supposed to be for infectious substances, but the color is completely off." I squinted at the stickers, trying to see what she was seeing. To my untrained eye, they looked official enough, but Agnes had always been better at details than me. "Could just be a printing error," I suggested hopefully. Agnes gave me the look she reserved for when I was being particularly dense. "Henry Watts, in 30 years of handling medical supplies, I never once saw a printing error on biohazard labels. Those things are regulated 6 ways from Sunday. You don't accidentally get them wrong." She was right, of course. Agnes was always right about these things. The package was labeled as coming from Rachel, our youngest daughter and the one we'd always thought was the most stable of the bunch. Rachel was a nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital downtown, had been for 8 years now. She was dedicated, hardworking, and genuinely seemed to care about helping people. Which made this package all the more troubling. "Maybe we should call her," I suggested, but Agnes was already shaking her head. "Something's not right here, Henry. Rachel knows I worked in medical administration. She knows I'd spot fake biohazard labels immediately. So why send us something that's obviously mislabeled unless—" She trailed off, but I could see the wheels turning in her sharp mind. "Unless what?" "Unless she wants us to know it's fake. Unless this is her way of asking for help without actually asking." We carried the package inside and set it on our kitchen table, that same table that had hosted explosives, cremation ashes, and spy equipment over the past few years. I was beginning to think we should burn the thing and get a new one. Agnes circled the package like a detective, examining every detail with the thoroughness that had made her one of the best medical administrators in the city. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the return address. "It says it's from Metro Medical Supply Company, but I know every medical supply company in this city, and there's no such place." She pulled out her reading glasses and studied the shipping label more closely. "And the tracking number format is wrong too. Real medical supply companies use a different numbering system." I was starting to get that familiar feeling of dread that had become associated with Father's Day in our household. "Agnes, what do you think is really in this box?" Before she could answer, the phone rang. Rachel's name appeared on the caller ID, and I answered with more caution than any father should feel when talking to his own child. "Dad?" Rachel's voice was strained, tight with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Did you get my package?" "Just arrived, honey. Haven't opened it yet." There was a long pause, and I could hear what sounded like medical equipment beeping in the background, the kind of sounds you hear in hospital corridors. "Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully. That package, it's not what it looks like. Agnes leaned in close to the phone, and I put it on speaker so she could hear. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Agnes asked gently. "The labels are fake. I made them fake on purpose because I needed you to know something was wrong before you opened it." Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "There are medications in that box, stolen medications from the hospital. If anyone finds them with your fingerprints on them..." My heart sank. "Rachel, what have you done?" "I've been taking pain medications from the hospital pharmacy," she said in a rush. "Not for myself, Dad, I swear not for myself. But the administration here has been cutting back on pain relief for the children in the cancer ward. They say it's too expensive, that we're using too much morphine and oxycodone." Agnes gripped my arm, her face reflecting the horror I felt in my own chest. "These kids, Dad, some of them are 6, 7 years old, dying of leukemia and brain tumors, and the hospital is rationing their pain medication to save money. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't watch them suffer when I had the power to help them." I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. "So you've been stealing drugs to give to sick children?" "The hospital's been conducting an investigation for the past month. They know someone's been taking medications from the pharmacy, and they're getting close to figuring out it's me." I panicked. "Dad. I thought if I could make it look like you were involved somehow, they'd back off because you're a retired pharmacist with no motive." Agnes shook her head in disbelief. "Rachel, honey, you thought we'd take the fall for you?" "No." Rachel's voice was desperate now. "I thought if I made the package obviously fake, you'd call the police, and when they investigated, they'd discover what the hospital has been doing to these children. I thought maybe exposure would force them to change their policies." The line went quiet except for the steady beeping of medical equipment in the background. "Where are you calling from?" I asked. "The pediatric cancer ward. I'm working a double shift because 2 other nurses called in sick, which means I'm the only one here to advocate for these kids." Her voice broke completely. "Dad, there's a little girl here, Emma Rodriguez, she's 8 years old with a brain tumor. She's been asking for her mommy and crying from pain for 6 hours, and the administration says she's already had her daily allotment of pain medication." Agnes was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she listened to our daughter describe the impossible situation she'd found herself in. "Rachel," I said slowly, "we need to call someone about this. Not to turn you in, but to get help for those children." "I already did," she said quietly. "That's the other reason I sent you that package. Inside, along with the medications I took, there are copies of internal hospital memos about the new cost-cutting measures. Documentation of how many children have been denied adequate pain relief. Photos of kids crying in their beds while administrators count pills like they're counting pennies." Agnes wiped her eyes and looked at me with determination. "Henry, we need to call that reporter from Channel 7, the one who did that expose on nursing home conditions last year." I nodded, already reaching for my phone. But before I could dial, we heard sirens approaching. Through our front window, I could see 2 police cars and what looked like an ambulance turning onto our street. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. "Rachel, are there police cars heading to the hospital right now?" "Yes," she said quietly. "The investigation concluded this morning. They know it was me. I called you because I wanted you to have the evidence before they arrest me. Someone needs to tell the world what's happening to these children." Agnes grabbed the phone. "Rachel, honey, where exactly are you right now?" "I'm in Emma's room. She finally fell asleep about an hour ago, and I'm not leaving her until someone else gets here to watch over her." The police cars had stopped in front of our house, and officers were getting out. But instead of the grim-faced federal agents we'd grown accustomed to, these were local cops who looked more concerned than aggressive. "Mrs. Watts?" One of them called out as he approached our front door. "We're looking for a package that was delivered here today. It may contain evidence in a criminal investigation." Agnes opened the door before I could stop her. "Officer, before you do anything else, you need to know that there are children suffering at Children's Memorial Hospital because of administrative cost-cutting measures." The officer looked confused. "Ma'am, we're here about stolen medications." "And you'll find them," Agnes said firmly. "But you'll also find evidence of medical neglect that's being covered up by hospital administration. Our daughter risked her career and her freedom to document what's happening to those kids." The next few hours passed in a blur of police interviews, evidence collection, and phone calls to reporters, hospital administrators, and child welfare advocates. The package on our kitchen table was indeed full of stolen medications, along with a thick folder of documentation that painted a disturbing picture of systematic neglect. Internal memos showed that Children's Memorial Hospital had cut pain medication budgets by 40% over the past year, despite treating more terminal cases than ever before. Photos that Rachel had taken on her phone showed children as young as 5 years old writhing in pain while nurses were forbidden to provide adequate relief. Most damning of all were recorded conversations between hospital administrators discussing how much money they were saving by limiting pain medication, with casual references to children's suffering as an acceptable cost of doing business. Rachel was arrested that evening, but by the time the story hit the news the next morning, public outrage was so intense that the district attorney was already talking about plea bargains and commendations for whistleblowing. The hospital's chief administrator resigned within 48 hours. The cost-cutting policies were immediately reversed. And little Emma Rodriguez, along with dozens of other children, finally got the pain relief they desperately needed. Rachel spent one night in jail before being released on her own recognizance, pending a full investigation into the hospital's practices. The charges against her were eventually dropped when a grand jury ruled that her actions constituted justifiable civil disobedience in the face of institutional child abuse. But the real vindication came 3 weeks later, when the hospital board voted unanimously to establish the Rachel Watts Pediatric Pain Management Protocol, ensuring that no child would ever again be denied adequate pain relief for financial reasons. On Father's Day morning, Rachel came to our house for the first time in months, looking tired but peaceful in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. "I brought you a real Father's Day gift this time," she said, handing me a small wrapped box. Inside was a hand-drawn card from Emma Rodriguez, the little girl whose suffering had started it all. In crayon letters, it said, "Thank you for having a brave daughter. Love, Emma." Agnes and I both started crying right there at the kitchen table, the same table that had brought us 4 years of anxiety and fear. But for the first time, it had also brought us something good. "So," Agnes said, wiping her eyes and looking around at our family, "what do you suppose next year's Father's Day will bring us?" Rachel laughed, the first genuine laugh we'd heard from her in months. "Maybe just a nice dinner and a baseball game on TV." I looked at my daughter, my brave, foolish, wonderful daughter who had risked everything to help children she barely knew, and felt prouder than I ever had before. "That sounds perfect," I said. "But maybe we should have it at a restaurant, just to be safe. Because if there's one thing I've learned over the past 4 years, it's that the Watts family and Father's Day don't always mix well. But sometimes, just sometimes, the trouble that finds us leads to something worth the heartache." And looking at that little girl's card, written in shaky crayon letters by hands that no longer hurt, I knew this was one of those times. By the 5th Father's Day since our troubles began, Catherine and I had developed what you might call a foolproof system for handling unexpected packages. We'd invested in a magnifying glass, a digital camera, and even one of those metal detector wands that security guards use. Our kitchen table had become something of a crime scene investigation station, complete with rubber gloves and evidence bags. So when the elegant package arrived that Saturday morning, delivered by a courier service we'd never heard of, we were ready for it. The box itself was beautiful, wrapped in expensive paper with a silk ribbon that probably cost more than some people spend on groceries. It looked like something you'd find in the window of a high-end department store, the kind of place where Patricia liked to shop when she was flush with cash from her acting gigs. But Catherine, who'd been married to me for 53 years and knew our children better than they knew themselves, spotted the problems immediately. "Henry, come look at this postmark," she said, adjusting her reading glasses and studying the shipping label with the intensity of a forensic investigator. I peered over her shoulder at the small print. Mailed from Denver, Colorado. So Patricia lives 15 minutes away in Riverside Heights. Why would she mail us something from Denver when she could just drive it over? Catherine had a point. Patricia had been living in the same apartment complex for 3 years now, close enough that she usually just dropped by unannounced when she wanted to see us. Mailing something from 3 states away made no sense unless she was traveling, and she hadn't mentioned any trips. Maybe she's working on a film project out there, I suggested. Patricia was an actress, not a famous one, but she made a decent living doing commercial work and the occasional small theater production. Her schedule was unpredictable, and she sometimes traveled for auditions or shoots. Catherine wasn't convinced. She pulled out the card that had been attached to the ribbon and studied it with the same careful attention she'd given the postmark. "Look at this handwriting," she said, holding the card up to the light. "This isn't Patricia's handwriting." I squinted at the neat cursive script that spelled out, "Happy Father's Day, Dad. Love, Patricia." To my eyes, it looked like our daughter's careful penmanship, but Catherine had always been better at details than me. "It looks like her writing to me," I said. "No, it doesn't. Patricia always dots her I's with little circles instead of dots, and she always crosses her T's with a flourish. This writing is too careful, too perfect. Someone's trying to copy her style but they don't know her little quirks." Catherine was right, of course. Catherine was always right about these things. Our Patricia had developed her distinctive handwriting style in high school drama class, where her teacher had insisted that actors needed to have elegant penmanship for autographs. She'd kept those habits for 20 years now. "And another thing," Catherine continued, "Patricia never calls you Dad in writing. She always writes Daddy because she knows it makes you smile." A chill ran down my spine. After 4 years of Father's Day disasters, I'd learned to trust Catherine's instincts about these things. If she said something was wrong, something was definitely wrong. "When's the last time you talked to Patricia?" I asked. Catherine frowned, thinking. "She stopped by last Sunday after church. Said she was excited about some new project she was working on, but she was being secretive about the details. You know how she gets when she's up for a big role." I remembered that visit. Patricia had seemed different somehow, more nervous than excited, and she'd kept checking her phone like she was expecting bad news. When I'd asked her about it, she just said she was waiting to hear back from her agent about an audition. But thinking back on it now, there had been other small differences too. She'd sat in the wrong chair at our kitchen table, the one by the window instead of her usual spot by the refrigerator. She'd asked for coffee black instead of with cream and sugar. Little things that didn't seem important at the time, but now felt significant. "Catherine," I said slowly, "I don't think that was Patricia last Sunday." My wife looked at me with the kind of sharp attention that had made her one of the best elementary school teachers in the district before she retired. "What do you mean?" "I mean I think someone else was here, pretending to be our daughter." The words sounded crazy even as I said them, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The woman who'd visited us had looked like Patricia, sounded like Patricia, even knew family details that only Patricia would know. But she'd gotten the small things wrong, the chair she sat in, the way she took her coffee, the way she signed her name. "We need to call Patricia right now," Catherine said, reaching for the phone. But when she dialed our daughter's number, it went straight to voicemail. She tried 3 more times with the same result. "Her phone's turned off," Catherine said, and I could hear the worry creeping into her voice. We decided to drive to Patricia's apartment complex to check on her in person. The 15-minute drive felt like an hour, and my imagination was running wild with possibilities, none of them good. Patricia's building was one of those modern complexes with a security gate and an intercom system. We'd been there dozens of times over the years, but this time felt different. When we pressed the button for her apartment, there was no answer. "Maybe she's out," I suggested, but Catherine was already shaking her head. "Patricia's car is in her parking spot," she said, pointing to the familiar blue Honda Civic in space 237. If she's here, why isn't she answering her phone or her door? We managed to convince the building manager to do a wellness check, explaining that we were worried about our daughter and hadn't been able to reach her for several days. The manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen who remembered us from previous visits, agreed to unlock Patricia's apartment. The apartment was empty, but not in the way you'd expect if someone had just stepped out for groceries. It was empty like someone had packed up and left in a hurry. Clothes were scattered across the bedroom floor, dresser drawers were pulled open, and there were papers strewn across the kitchen table. But what caught my attention was the framed photo on Patricia's nightstand, a picture of our family from last Christmas. Someone had drawn a circle around my face in red ink, and there were handwritten notes in the margins that made my blood run cold. Birth date, March 15, 1951. Social Security, 555 XXXXXX. Pension account, First National Bank. Medical insurance, Medicare Plan B. Catherine gasped when she saw it. Henry, someone's been researching you. They know your personal information. Mrs. Chen was looking increasingly alarmed as we explained what we'd found. She agreed to call the police while Catherine and I drove back home to examine that package more carefully. By the time we returned to our house, I was starting to piece together a terrifying picture. Someone had been studying our family, learning our habits and personal details. They'd somehow gotten close enough to Patricia to know intimate family information, and they'd used that knowledge to impersonate her during that visit last Sunday. The beautiful package sitting on our kitchen table wasn't a Father's Day gift. It was part of an elaborate identity theft scheme, and I was the target. We called Detective Rodriguez, who'd handled our previous Father's Day emergencies and had become something of a family friend over the years. She arrived within 20 minutes, bringing a crime scene team and a grim expression that told me she was taking this seriously. Based on what you've told me, Detective Rodriguez said as her team photographed the package from every angle, it sounds like your daughter may have been targeted by professional identity thieves. They study their marks for weeks or months, learning everything they can about their lives and families. But why Patricia? Catherine asked. She doesn't have money or valuable assets. She had access to you, Detective Rodriguez explained. As your daughter, she could visit your home, learn your routines, gain your trust. To criminals like this, family members are just tools to get to the real target. The crime scene team opened the package with the same careful precision we'd grown accustomed to over the years. Inside, they found exactly what Detective Rodriguez had predicted, a complete identity theft kit designed to steal my life. Fake birth certificates, forged social security cards, medical records that had been altered to match my health history, and even a power of attorney document that would have given someone else control over my finances. Everything needed to become Henry Watts and leave the real Henry Watts with nothing. This is sophisticated work, Detective Rodriguez said, examining the documents. Professional quality forgeries, detailed financial research, even medical records that match your actual health history. Whoever's behind this has been planning it for months. But then one of the crime scene technicians made a discovery that changed everything. Detective, there's something else in here, he announced, holding up a small electronic device about the size of a matchbox. It's a GPS tracker, but it's been modified with what looks like a panic button. Detective Rodriguez examined the device carefully. This isn't standard equipment for identity thieves. Someone hid this in the package deliberately, hoping it would be found. Catherine gripped my arm. You think Patricia put it there? I think your real daughter managed to slip this into the package somehow, probably hoping you'd be smart enough to call the police instead of opening it yourselves. The GPS tracker was still active, broadcasting a signal to a location about 30 miles outside the city. Detective Rodriguez called for backup and tactical support, explaining that we might be dealing with a kidnapping situation as well as identity theft. We need you to stay here, she told Catherine and me as her team prepared to follow the GPS signal. If these people are as dangerous as they seem, we don't want to put you at additional risk. The next few hours were the longest of my life. Catherine and I sat in our living room, drinking coffee we didn't want and watching the clock tick by with agonizing slowness. Every time the phone rang, we jumped, hoping for news about Patricia. Finally, at nearly midnight, Detective Rodriguez called with an update. "We found her," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Patricia's alive and relatively unharmed. She's been held in an abandoned warehouse for the past 3 weeks by a criminal organization that specializes in identity theft and impersonation fraud." 3 weeks. Catherine gasped. "But we saw her last Sunday." "That was Maria Santos, a professional con artist who's been impersonating your daughter. She spent months studying Patricia's life, learning her mannerisms and family relationships. The plan was for Santos to take over Patricia's identity while the real Patricia disappeared permanently." My hands were shaking as I processed what Detective Rodriguez was telling me. "You mean they were planning to kill her?" "That was the eventual plan, yes. But Patricia managed to sabotage their operation by hiding that GPS tracker in the identity theft package. She'd been working on escape plans for weeks, and when she overheard them talking about targeting you next, she decided to take action." "How did she get the tracker into the package?" "According to Patricia, she convinced them that the identity theft would be more believable if it came with a sentimental Father's Day gift. She offered to help prepare the package, and that's when she slipped in the GPS device. She was betting that you and Catherine would be suspicious enough after your previous experiences to call the police instead of opening it. Patricia came home the next morning, thinner and shaken but determined not to let the experience define her. She'd spent 3 weeks in captivity, but she'd used that time to gather information about the criminal organization that could help the FBI shut down their entire operation. I kept thinking about all the other families they were probably targeting," she told us as we sat around our kitchen table, that same table that had brought us 5 years of anxiety and terror. "I couldn't let them keep destroying people's lives just to save my own." The criminal organization was eventually dismantled, with arrests made in 6 different states. Maria Santos, the woman who'd been impersonating Patricia, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for kidnapping, identity theft, and fraud. But the real victory came when Patricia decided to use her acting skills for something positive. She began working with law enforcement agencies, teaching workshops on how to spot impersonation scams and identity theft schemes. On Father's Day morning, she brought us a simple card, no package, no elaborate wrapping, just a handwritten note that said, "Happy Father's Day, Daddy. Thank you for teaching me to be brave." It was signed with her distinctive circle-dotted I's and flourished T's, and it was the most beautiful Father's Day gift I'd ever received. "So," Catherine said as we sat in our living room, finally enjoying a peaceful Father's Day morning, 5 years, 5 daughters, 5 federal crimes. "Think we've seen the last of it?" I looked around at my family, my brilliant, brave, occasionally criminal daughters, and my sharp-eyed wife who'd saved us all more times than I could count. "I certainly hope so," I said. "But if not, at least we know we can handle whatever comes next." Patricia laughed, the first genuine laugh we'd heard from her since her ordeal. "Maybe next year we should just skip Father's Day altogether and take a nice vacation somewhere far away." "As long as it's not Denver," Catherine said dryly, and we all burst into laughter. Because after 5 years of bombs, murder plots, government conspiracies, medical fraud, and identity theft, we'd learned that sometimes the best defense against disaster is a good sense of humor and a family that sticks together no matter how crazy things get. And looking around our living room at my beautiful, complicated, occasionally felonious family, I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to know the country in which you are in, listening to this story. Which country is that? Please comment below.